Hello, hello. Welcome back to another live stream. If you're watching live, feel free to leave a comment wherever you're watching from, LinkedIn, YouTube, or the private Facebook group where you're watching from. Today we're talking about a very important topic, not only to myself and the stage of life I'm in, but for a lot of you, most likely. We're going to talk about parenting and setting our children up for financial success, but also not sacrificing our own financial success, right? We want to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of them. And I have my wonderful friend and amazing human and mom, Natalie Jacobs. So I'll introduce her in a moment. And let's see, any other housekeeping? If you're watching the recording, feel free to comment where you're watching from and comment any questions that you have. For those of you who are live, feel free to comment any questions and I'll check them every now and then. But then we'll stop at the end as well and answer any of your questions. So without further ado, let me get to bring Natalie here for a moment. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Spencer. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for doing this. So, if you want to quickly just introduce yourself and what you do, and like what's your family situation's like, what stage of parenting you're in as well, and then we'll just dive right into all the different things.
Of course. So, I'm Natalie Jacobs. I am the founder and CEO of Equalizer Consulting. So, from the business side of things, I specialize in metadata and rights management for music companies, musicians. There's a lot of different applications to what I do. And then on a personal level, I have been with my husband for many, many years. We met in college. We did not get married until 10 years after that. And then we didn't have children until 5 years after that. But I am mom to two boys who are 10 and 12. So we are firmly in preteen chaos, middle school, all of that kind of stuff. My younger one is going into fifth grade and it's very busy and opinionated and definitely not necessarily harder than earlier parts of parenting, but different challenges at each stage, I'm sure.
And it's like the first week of school, like right now.
On Thursday, as
Okay.
I was
I keep seeing
just telling
pictures.
them, yes, I was telling them not to interrupt me, although that would be probably very appropriate for this.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's just start right away. I'm playing. Oh, that's not what I want to share. Um, Let me see if I do this. Okay, I am going to switch. I'm playing host of and technology master, especially with a guest. So I'll get back to sharing Natalie here in a second. So for those of you who don't know me or haven't seen a live stream before, my name is Spencer List. I'm a certified financial planner, specifically a holistic financial life planner for music executives, but a lot of my clients are not in the music industry as well. I was a former professional musician, played all the saxophones and woodwinds for a very long time. I'm a small talk and holiday cynic. I was born 5 minutes before Christmas. Maybe that's part of it. And I do not drink caffeine. So if you want to get coffee, you're welcome to order one for me and have two, I guess. And outside of music, I enjoy woodworking and hockey. I'm an MF Doom super fan and husband and recent father. So we are 8 months, a little over 8 months in. So I'm at earlier stages than Natalie. Um, and so currently listening to, man, I listened to this album back when I was in grad school, The Remedy, Live at the Village Vanguard by Kurt Rosenwinkel. It's absolutely insane. And I have something blocking this, but my hot take of the day is I never want to see you eat the food at the end of your cooking video. It's a personal pet peeve. I can't stand it. I don't need to see you eat the food you just cooked. I just want to see you make it and end the video, please. So I don't know, Natalie, how do you feel about people eating food on camera on your?
I am actually, they always seem to be scooping things out of those like gigantic sort of flat bowls. And I'm like, where are they getting these gigantic bowls from? And why that? I don't know. So I can take it or leave it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they food content is a strange place, but I have been inspired before, so not totally hating on it. So you might be wondering why a professional musician, former professional musician, is now a financial planner, and it's because of this. checking statement. This is a screenshot. We are very close to exactly 10 years from now. My checking account had $67 left in it. I came home from a tour. It was a very fun tour over the summer, but I was spending a lot, wasn't making a whole lot. I in my freelancing in Dallas, there's a lot of money to be made in Dallas. And so when you're touring, especially the one I did, it was more for fun. I wasn't gigging at home, making the good money that I was used to. And I was spending a lot. And so this was just a wake up call for me. Felt vulnerable, scared, spent my whole life becoming a master at my craft and didn't really have much to show for it. I was missing friends and family's weddings to play strangers' weddings, playing in $1 million homes, not owning one. And just started teaching myself everything I could about financial literacy. And that, long story short, the curiosity led me to become a certified financial planner, but also to teach my music community financial literacy. And so here we are. Before we start, quick disclaimer, this is just educational, so none of this is actually financial or tax advice. And before I start, because I want to add Natalie, I need to change what I'm sharing. I love the tiny technical difficulties. Okay, can you hear me, Natalie?
I can.
Okay, good. So if I do this, now you're here.
Ah, we're both little
Awesome.
bubbles. I love it.
Okay. Okay, so why does this matter? I think it's pretty obvious. When we have children or want to have, planning to have children, there's a lot of stress around that, not just about becoming a parent or how to be a parent throughout the rest of their lives and your life, but there's also the financial stress. And it's really easy we're going to talk about strategies and tactics towards the end, but I find it's really easy to skip the steps of identifying how you want to parent. What do you want your ideal life to look like? We're going to go through all the different things to be thinking about, then let the strategies and tactics fall into place. So let your values and goals and intention lead your financial plan. So we're going to cover all the different phases, from before having a child to early stages, which is where I am, where Natalie's at, sort of middle teenage, and then beyond, like when they become adults, right? Because parenting never ends. And I'm going to share some examples here and there throughout, from some of my clients. So Natalie, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because you mentioned, you 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 knew your husband for you're with your husband for 10 years before you got married, but then another 5 years before you had children. So I'd love to hear more about your decision on timing, because our decision was unintentional and intentional in the way that we were both professional musicians. We felt like we felt like we missed out on sort of normal life activities like traveling or enjoying life. And so we actually waited, after we both sort of moved on from being professional musicians officially. We spent like 4 or 5 years just like traveling every now and then, just enjoying each other, enjoying life, like really making up for lost time is not the best way to put it, but that's sort of kind of how we viewed it. Of We had spent our whole lives like having unconventional schedules, doing things that sort of we didn't enjoy in the music world. And so we waited for that, but then also just to be a little bit more financially stable and comfortable. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the timing of when did it feel right? Like what were the conversations like when you were thinking about whether to even have them or when,
Right,
and all that stuff.
right. I think for us, a lot of it was wanting to just enjoy being married for a little bit before, diving into the next step of having children. we got married. We bought our first townhouse the year after. So, from a financial stability, we were like, great. We actually bought our townhouse right before they shut down all the mortgages in 2008. So,
Oh, wow.
and then promptly after that, my husband got laid off. So it was financially, there was actually quite a period of instability right after we bought the house. So even though, we also kind of wanted to just enjoy being married, it also wasn't necessarily the right time to go straight into having kids right after getting married either, because all of this other stuff was going on. So, we did wait a little bit. It wasn't necessarily too much of a conscious decision, but there was certainly a point where I was like, I think I'm ready. It sounds really hokey, doesn't it? Where you're like, oh, biologically, you will know. But no, biologically, I did know. I
Interesting.
was definitely at that point where I was like, I'm ready and would like to have kids now. And then, that was the first one. So he's now 12, coming on 13. The second child was more of a surprise than anything, but but at that point, we were, back to having more stable output. My husband had, gotten himself a job, and I was, still doing what I was doing and progressing, sufficiently in my own career. So, stability wise, it, did not cause any additional stress to us, to add children into the mix.
And what about the conversations you were having about like your values as a family? Like, there people have different philosophies around this, whether they're like child first or family first, or there's all kinds of things out there that you could
Yeah,
ascribe to
it's
if you want to. But did you have conversations about that before? Were they more like, okay, now our baby's here, let's talk about like how we want to, teach them respect, or just there's so many things to think about in terms of how you want to parent, how do you want to model, like what were those
right.
conversations like in your family?
I don't know if we had a lot of conversations ahead of time. A lot of times it was, things kind of coming up on the spot as things are happening. For anybody who's a parent knows that things just, you have to pivot on a dime. It's crazy. Some of the things you're like, well, I never thought I'd have that conversation, or never thought that would be a scenario I have to consider, especially having two boys who are constantly doing something. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting conversation. So a lot of it, I think that as certain scenarios have happened over the time that we've been parents, we've sort of had to pause and say, okay, where do we stand on this, and what is the right way to go about it? And
Hmm.
we don't always agree. Sometimes, he's like, I want to go this tack, and then another time I might have a different tack than he was thinking. Um, a piece of advice I was given a long time ago is to, if you need to and you're not sure if you guys are in agreement as parents, is to just pause and say there will be a consequence, or there will be something happening off, the back of this. But, we as parents are going to confer and come back to you. And it's okay
Yeah.
to take that pause and go, figure out what you need to do as parents, because we're always learning. Every single day your children are teaching you something, whether or not you realize it. So
Hmm.
you have to be able to kind of learn and engage differently with whatever stage you're at. But yeah, you obviously have to have those conversations, but I don't know if we prescriptively were like, let's talk about some of the things ahead of time.
Yeah. I'm sure that's typical, right? There's so much coming to
Yeah.
think about what's going to happen. So financially, how did you prepare? And I'll preface with the main thing that we did was, and I just have it on here, is we were just like, all right, we don't know exactly what's going to change financially. We know that things will, right? They are humans that need to be taken care of, and there are different ways to take care of them. Everyone has different situations that they're in, like people are gifting you things or you're having to pay for everything yourself, whatever it might be. We'll talk about daycare shortly, but we just did okay. We don't know exactly. This was before our baby was born. We just started saving $500 a month in a high yield savings account as just like it could be for who knows what. And it ended up turning out to be an amazing thing because we ended up switching daycares after having just sort of a
Hmm.
mediocre experience, and it was more expensive. We wanted to move to a better one anyway. we just were able to do it sooner because we did this. So that was just, it's a real basic one, just sort of, we don't know, but let's just do something just to be prepared. And it really helped a lot. So did y'all do anything in terms of preparing financially, or what was your, and obviously you waited because of your financial situation, but what was it like
Right.
for you?
It was mostly a question of sort of estimating for us. Like, what do we think the costs are going to be? Daycare prices can range wildly. And for us, one of us coming out of work to take care of the kids wasn't really a consideration that either of us wanted to do. So we knew daycare was going to be a priority. And at least in LA, sometimes you have to register for these daycares months and months and months ahead. There's some of them, it's like the second you're thinking about getting pregnant, you have to register for the, the daycare just so that you
Right.
can secure your spot. Um, you know, just thinking ahead to what kind of costs like that we would have to think about, what things we realistically knew we needed to spend money on. Um, we actually didn't necessarily start immediately, upon getting pregnant and being like, we're going to start putting money aside. But we did very much think about, when is the right time to start a 529 plan for them, or, what additional budget items do we need to consider on a monthly basis? And those change too all the time, right? It's one thing when they're a baby and you know that they need diapers and you know that they are growing out of their clothes every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and it's very different when you get to the age where maybe now you're in youth sports and instead of diapers, you're spending, $150 on a new baseball bat every 6 months. So the things do vary over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is certainly a periodic assessment of like, where are we at now? How much are we spending now? Neither of my kids are fashionistas. This is, hold on. They're boys. They wouldn't be fashionistas, but they're not like super fashion forward. They're not bugging me all the time for new clothes or anything like that. But I can see, I certainly have friends who, are in a different situation, and their kids are very specific about what kind of clothes they're willing to wear or what kind of shoes they want. And my two don't tend to care all that much. So, you have to really evaluate, I think, your own situation and like what's that budget, and don't just do it once. You have to do it every
Mm-hmm.
so often because, of course, things are changing.
Yeah, and not just what your kids want, but what are you willing to do? And
Right.
because what they want
Absolutely.
might not align with what you want as a family, and
Right.
eventually that becomes an opportunity to educate them about that. One of the major questions I get a lot from new parents is like, what's the cash flow going to be like? How do we plan for that? And in many cases, you can try to estimate those things. They typically never turn out the way you think they do. But what I do see is this trend is that your cash flow sort of naturally works itself out where you are at home taking care of your child and you're not doing other things instead. And so naturally, your cash flow shifts towards things towards your child. You don't have to like cut back on something else. Like your life has changed in a great way in most cases, and so you're naturally cutting back, so to speak, by just not doing some of the other things in your life because you either don't have time or you don't want to. Like your priorities have changed. So I find that there is a common stress, but it usually is alleviated when people realize, oh, like we do have the cash flow for this because naturally we're not doing X, Y, and Z because we have a child and our life is different. So sometimes it just works out where you can plan all you want, but I tend to believe that just your cash flow will naturally adjust and it doesn't need too much of a microscope on it unless we're overspending, of course, then
Right.
that's a different
But
story.
I do agree with that as well. I think that, having some sort of understanding and estimations of how much you are spending is important, but it doesn't need to be down to the dollar
Yeah.
because, generally, and there's always those unexpected things as well.
Yes.
Um, you know, I look at it's unexpected how much my children eat. So
Maybe
you
that should be
hear about it.
expected.
Maybe it should be, But you hear about it, and I'm like, there was no ordering off the kids' menu. By the time they were sort of 6 years old, they were like, I want a full-size meal. I order off the kids' menu because I'm like, I'm just going to order the kid size. I don't need that. They're like, give me all the food, So, but those kinds of things as a family of four do add up. You want to go
Hmm.
to, a vacation, you want to pay for admission to places. It's very easy for something that conceptually you're like, oh, that's only $40 a ticket, but then you multiply that by four, now you're at 160. Or you want to go to a concert and you're out 800. Whatever those kinds of things are, you do have to sort of have an awareness of what you can do within those parameters.
Absolutely. So the next thing is early care. So you touched on it a little bit, but there's all different ways to think about this. People want to stay home with their children to spend that quality time. Some people don't have the option, right? They have to go back to work. So there's the trade off of childcare versus the missed income. Stay at home parenting is still a job, if not the hardest job out there. Probably the most fulfilling and rewarding job there is. And then a support system. Some people's families live across the country. Others, like mine, 2 blocks away. And actually, so for this example, this was one of the things that was like sort of a subconscious sort of planning that we did. Is when we purchased this home, we picked it because of a lot of reasons, but one of them was it's 2 blocks away from my mother. And I mean, that was like 4 or 5 years ago we bought this house. And so, we don't always have that kind of foresight or the availability to make those kinds of decisions, but what an investment to make that decision well in advance of taking advantage of it. And here we are, and my mom watches our child 2 days a week and gets to spend a lot of time with his extended family. I mean, we could have picked a house that was 30 to 60 minutes away easily. And
Right.
so those small decisions compound over your lifetime, really. And so that was one of the small things we did. And then just preparing for the cost of daycare for us, we decided to continue both of us working. And we both work from home. So technically, like anytime the daycare is on holiday or my mom is doing something, like we can still watch our child because we're working from home. Like we have more flexibility. Everyone's different, though. I totally accept anyone's decision around this. But any thoughts here before we go to the next one?
I mean, I'm so grateful that I had a lot of flexibility. I was not working from home, but I had a lot of flexibility in my job. And we actually picked a daycare that was closer to my office than
Ah,
to our house because that meant if there was, and there's always an emergency of some kind at the most inopportune times. So it was something that I knew it was a 10-minute drive from my office rather than being something that I would have to drive, 30 minutes potentially, maybe even longer to get closer to my house. So we actually made that specific decision both for daycare and preschool so that we could essentially drive along the route that I would take to go to work because I had more flexibility in just being able to, pop out. I had very gracious, supervisors at the time. Kids will bring home the weirdest diseases, and you find yourself out of the office for a week while you're trying to run royalty reports. And, having somebody who's very gracious and willing to, afford you that time and not, give you too much of a problem with it, especially during those early years, was incredibly important. So yeah, that for us, the location of the daycare and preschool might have seemed unconventional to a lot of people because it was not because it wasn't close to home. It was
yeah.
close to work.
It just goes to show like all these decisions are very unique to your family, your values, like your unique situation. There is no right or wrong answer for any of this. Okay, so this is something that I find I've had experience with clients where we're we're so focused on setting up our children for financial success that we sacrifice our own financial stability. So think about, I like to tell people to think about it like the air mask, oxygen mask is dropped down from the airplane. They tell you to put your own mask on first for a reason, right? So that you can
Yep.
help your child with their mask. And it's the same concept. Another common phrase in my industry is you can take loans for college, but you can't take loans for retirement. That's like a common one that people, a good way to think about it. And but it is natural for a lot of people to, they'll say things like, I don't care, I'll live in a shack. Like, they're willing to sacrifice, but whether they're really willing to in reality, I'm not so sure. But maybe there's some just pride or just wanting to be seen as a good parent. There's a lot there to unpack. But I can't stress it enough that you must take care of yourself first, because your children will be okay. They the last thing I want to say before I ask for Natalie's feedback here is that I'm imagining like a child growing up with everything, their parents afforded them the things that were important to them throughout their life, but they sacrificed their future. Well, guess who has to pay the price in some way or another, whether it's caring for the parents or financially covering things. Uh, in my personal opinion, I don't ever want to be a burden on my child, whether it's physically or financially. And so I understand that maybe there are things that won't happen so that we can take care of ourselves throughout their life, because the end or the later result will get the delayed gratification that they will be able to live, in an example of like, oh, they might take some loans for school or something, like that's way better than them having to financially take care of me. Right. So any thoughts on taking care of your own selves before your children financially?
We've always heard the same advice. My husband and I have actually always heard that same thing from every financial advisor I think we've ever spoken with is, make sure that you are not putting yourself in a precarious financial position because you're trying to fund that 529 or, trying to do something for the kids that puts your ability to save and keep your own accounts, solvent.
Yeah.
So basically, yes, that is a priority, is making sure that you are, you've got the right savings and you're not clearing out your savings accounts to fund a 529. And you don't know for sure what your kid's going to end up doing. Is your kid end up going to college? Are they going to go to trade school? Are they going to do something completely different? You don't know. So um, 529s are a great example of a way to, save for your kids, but at the same time, yeah, maybe your 401k, your IRA, whatever, still needs to take priority.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of just the advice, we've always heard the same thing. So we've kind of always followed along with that and been very grateful and fortunate enough to be able to do both.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about college here in a moment. So, school age and teenage years, this is your bread and butter now. I'm sure it happened faster than you thought, but because
You
even
kidding?
just the 8 months has
Yes.
happened, in a blink of an eye. So I'll let you just give me some thoughts on your experience here and just the decisions that you're making financially around this stuff, and whether it's before it happens or sort of after they come home and ask you to do something and
Right.
that they want to
Well,
sign up for.
I will say the stage that we're in right now is surprisingly expensive in different ways than perhaps, we're certainly not dealing with a weekly daycare or
Right.
something like that. And even after school, as they get older, the programs that, at least in Los Angeles, the programs they've been able to get into, it's like we don't have to pay for after school care. My son's middle school now has extracurriculars that are all provided, so we don't have to worry about shelling out, an extra 150 a week to have them do the extended care from like 2:30 to 5 or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Um, so there's definitely things like that that have become easier. So, you get that very intense payments of daycare and preschool and then the after school care until they're about in second grade. And then it starts becoming easier. And we were always joking, When we got our car a couple of years ago, we were like, this is our own celebration for not having to pay for after school care anymore because we can now put that towards the car payment on, let go of the 11-year-old car and get a new one with a car payment because we don't have to pay for after school care, right? But there are things like camp. Similarly, you know, day, uh, day camps during the summer can be very expensive, and you're not necessarily paying for them in the summer either. If you really want the best rates, you might be signing up for those in January. So you're thinking summer camp and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to put that in my budget for the summer, but you actually need to put that on your budget in the middle of the winter because yeah, you're shelling out a lot of money. And depending on
Mm-hmm.
what the camp is, those can be incredibly expensive. I've seen $1,000 a week. I've seen, Parks and Rec, they offer them for closer to 200 a week. So the range can be huge in terms of what those things are. Yeah, if you're signing them up for sports, AYSO for soccer is very affordable, and then you just buy them shin guards, cleats, and a ball. If you sign them up for baseball or ice hockey, you know, you're looking at exponentially more, or even, travel sports of any kind. Those things get incredibly
Mm-hmm.
expensive for families. So, you really have to evaluate when those things are hitting, and it's not necessarily at the time the activity is taking place,
Yeah,
right? So you have to kind of
absolutely.
like preload some of that in terms of your budget consideration.
Mm-hmm. And some of the client experiences I've had is a common question is like, do we want them to go to public school, private school? That is a whole presentation on its own. Another one
Yep.
is like, what district, is your the home? Like, kind of like we decided to buy this home. The schools was part of it, but proximity to family was another part. There's a lot of decisions that go into housing, and I have clients who've actively decided to stay or move into a higher cost neighborhood with the trade off of a better school district, knowing, like, understanding that maybe financially it's more difficult and maybe it's taking up a little bit more of their cash flow, but they know what they're getting in value in return for that. So and I'm sure there's many, many more things that y'all have dealt with that maybe you didn't think about, but those, the list goes on. And like, do you even do summer camps? Do you just travel with them? Do you need a break? Like the extracurriculars, I never played ice hockey. I played hockey growing up, but my parents were like, absolutely not. We cannot afford that. My family went bankrupt when I was 2 years old, so like we were poor.
Right.
Grew up on
Right.
Frostless Pop Tarts, if anyone knew that those even
Right.
existed. But yeah, it's like we're not playing. I never could do ice hockey, and it was like, those things.
Right.
Those things do form your relationship with money, but it is what it is, right? Like, and the decisions you've made with your children is going to inform their relationship with money. There is no way for us to, whether they have a fantastic financial experience growing up or a horrible one, there really is no right or wrong, in my opinion. I think either way, they're going to be trials and tribulations in terms of how they view money, whether they're silver spooned or I don't know what the opposite of that is, like dirt shovel
Right.
or something. Like, uh,
Right. And they interestingly, they don't necessarily judge, their activities and stuff like based on the amount of money that we spent on it. Occasionally, we will remind them that something is very expensive to do, and that might be why we are either doing it or not.
mm-hmm,
Um, but they don't necessarily judge it. My son, my younger one, he's very, very into trying new sports and stuff like that. And he decided one day he wanted to try volleyball. And the only co-ed league I could find was a $10 league, and it was run by Parks and Rec, and it was not too far from the house. And so we're like, if you want to do it, that's fine. And it was a $10 league, and he doesn't know it was a $10 league. He
yeah,
doesn't really care it was a $10 league, but he got to do volleyball for the 3 months or whatever it was, and then decided that was enough volleyball and he didn't want to do volleyball anymore. And that was fine. It was very low, low lift on my part to let
yeah,
him try it. And it
yeah,
wasn't, his opinion on it was very much, he wanted to try it, and that's
Yeah.
all that really mattered to him.
Are you sure you don't want to keep doing
I know,
it?
I know. Although watching 7-year-olds play volleyball is very chaotic. So
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so let's talk about college a little bit. So this is more like traditional advice. With when we're talking about like college planning, there's a lot of this is not just one, but multiple presentations worth of things to talk about here of how do you plan for school. And so yes, 529 plans are a great way to save for education, but there are some other things to consider whether they even want to go to college anymore by the time they get to that age. People nowadays are asking, is that going to be a thing anymore that we do as a society? Do they want to go to trade school? Do they want to take a gap year? Or do they want to start a business? This is actually something we've talked about. We're both entrepreneurs. And so, honestly, we're probably going to encourage our child to learn about business and find something that they can help other people and provide value to the world, and like start a business, start 10 businesses, fail at all of them. Who cares? When you're a kid, it's like, but then those lessons can turn into somebody starting a business at a very young age and getting better at it. I mean, honestly, that's kind of where we're headed. So we are still planning for college and saving for it. For us, we just did a lump sum at the beginning, and then as my business grows and our income increases, we'll start contributing more. But we're still like planning for it, but we're also open to these other things, or they might get a full ride, or get grants, depending on your financial situation. And then there's not just tuition that you're dealing with. It's like there's food, there's transportation, there's housing, there's all kinds of expenses outside of just tuition where like, there I actually think that the new big beautiful bill expanded what qualified expenses are, so that has made it a little bit better where 529 plans can cover a lot more expenses when they're in school. But a lot of people don't realize that the cash flow that you're spending on your children, like to feed them, for instance, you can just plan to continue using that cash flow when they're in school, to like you can just give them money to get for food or to do a meal plan. Like most people don't realize that it's already part of your cash flow. You can just keep going even though they're out of the house. You can just still plan for that for another 4 years or whatever. There's a whole slew of planning strategies around this, including whether you should do some in a 529, some in a taxable brokerage that's more flexible. I mean, it's unlimited. How much do you want to fund? Do you want to teach them about loans by having them take out the federal ones and then you pay them off if they get good grades? I mean, there's just endless amounts of strategies here. But what is y'all's philosophy on this, or how have you approached this? Considering you're, you know, halfway there, age wise.
yeah, it does happen very quickly. And interestingly, uh, we have one who, he wants to go to UCLA. When we were putting together our financial plan for you financial planners have projections based on certain colleges and so on, like in-state colleges versus out-of-state versus private versus whatever. So it became part of the financial projection was, within our larger financial concepts, like what would the 529 target be for a school like UCLA? And how much approximately do we need to put in if we want to meet certain goals? Obviously if we don't get there, that is what it is,
Yeah.
but these, if you put this much in, you should be able to get there. That was essentially how we kind of strategized it, so it was part of our overall financial plan.
Mm-hmm.
The younger one, he's the kind of kid who might end up with a PhD, so we might have to rethink that at some point because he might be in school forever. Um, However, there's flexibility. Maybe his brother won't use it all. I
True.
don't know. So there is sort of that flexibility, and I joke that he might end up with a PhD, but from a financial standpoint, realistically, of the two, he is the one that potentially will end up needing further degrees and additional things, along the way. So, we just try to keep that in mind and try and be flexible. And if neither of them use it, I think I'll go to culinary school instead.
Yeah, exactly. Make yourself the beneficiary. Yeah, and you have to think about that. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, but then if this happens, if they want to go to grad school and, post grad, is there a point where, we say, well, you can take care of that, or we'll do X or Y or
Right,
Z? Like, or there, by then you'll be working, and especially in grad school, like, it's so much easier to get funds or working. I forgot what
right.
they're called. I did it in grad school, where you work while you're there, and there's just so many more resources. But those are the kinds of decisions that you have to make, and then those decisions change, right? The plan is always changing.
Right.
Um,
It's all a big guess because you don't know exactly what they're gonna want to do. Even now, he's 12, we're what, approximately 5, 6 years out. We still don't know exactly how this is all gonna shape up. So even though it's
hmm
getting closer, there's still a lot of unknowns. So the best you can do is sort of project based on the parts that you do know
Yeah.
and go from there.
I don't think I have it on my slides, but another thing to consider here, and I have clients who are doing this, they want to help with like a down payment on a home, or they want to prepare to help for their wedding if they do decide to get married. Like, there's these other milestones in lives as they become adults that you may want to help your children with. This adds on to the planning that you want to do, and that also helps you determine where you should be saving and investing to get the most tax efficiency and all that good stuff too. So, and then I don't, I, we'll see. I don't think I have some of these on the strategies, but like long term inheritance, trusts, there's all kinds of stuff. Like, how do you want your assets to be passed down? There are people who want to uh, see their assets go to their children while they're still alive, right? The traditional way that we did it in society for a long time, and people still do this, is once I'm dead, you can have everything or whatever. But it's like a lot of people now are realizing, well, why wait? Like, I'd love to help them
Mm.
now with whatever it is, and I want to help. I want to see them like improve their lives with it. Or so there is a whole, again, another probably 10 presentations on that stuff. But then there's this longer term plan. Have y'all thought about just? I know there's a lot to unpack there, but anything in particular, like as they become adults and like long term, have y'all thought about that?
We actually do have a trust in place. So that was a decision that my husband and I made several years ago was to sort of, and it came a little bit out of like motherhood paranoia of, what happens if something happens to
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And so we did actually put that trust in place. And so all the provisions for them in that space are already built in to how the trust is set up for them. So as they become adults, I don't know if we've necessarily thought too much about like, yes, we want to put this aside for weddings or anything like that. But, I think there's always just we try and keep a general flexibility to, how we have the availability of funds to access for certain things, but also keeping in mind like our retirement still is coming first, I want
Absolutely,
to make
yeah.
sure that we're safe on that before we start worrying about, can they can we give them a down payment for a house?
hmm
So it's very much thinking in terms of um, yeah, what do we need to do for ourselves? Make sure that we're good, make sure that, at our current stage, can we take those family vacations? Can we create those moments? Can we create those times while they're still here? And then potentially, yeah, maybe when they have gone to college or they've moved on and they're, now working or something like that, then maybe that is something where we start thinking more about, what can we give them for their own future and whatever life they're going to set up in the
hmm
other space. But yeah, I know we're not necessarily there yet. It's not to say we aren't thinking about, what that future might hold, but yeah, we're just kind of, again, controlling what we can control right now within having a trust setup. I think that's where we're trying to keep most of our things in order.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's just great estate planning. Like, what if something happens to us and they're not even adults yet? how, make sure
Right.
their health, education, maintenance, and support is taken care of. There's somebody, a fiduciary, that's like making sure the money's going where it should. No one's taking advantage of the money or them or anything like. And then we get in that gets into like who's the guardian of them, if that's a whole estate planning
Right.
spiel. But that's fantastic that you've done that.
Yeah, the stuff you don't want to think about, but it's so
Yep,
important.
yep.
It's
But you
it's
need
it's it's
get it
worse
out of the
if
way.
you don't, right? Yeah, it's
Exactly.
worse if you don't.
Yeah, I say this phrase a lot. Make logical decisions now in a, or make decisions in a logical state now, so that your family doesn't have to make emotional decisions later.
That's smart.
So what most parents miss is kind of just the whole purpose of this talk is like, and we're about to talk about the strategies briefly, because there's just too many to go through. But like, what is the purpose of money for your family? What are your priorities? What are your values? And then, in my opinion, like all that really matters is that you're present. Like you mentioned, like the volleyball thing. It's like it doesn't matter that it was $10. Like they don't really care. They might notice stuff. If like I obviously noticed that my life was a little bit different than everyone else's, given that we were incredibly poor. But like that doesn't, you know, they were still present. And so, in my opinion, that's probably the most important thing. Is there anything you'd add to this?
I think they do pay attention to how we spend money. They pay
Yeah.
attention, I think, to what we spend money
Oops.
on. A lot of it is modeling, right? So how we model our behavior also results in that. You know, they don't receive an allowance tied to specific chores, for example. They receive an allowance periodically based on their general engagement for doing things without complaining. I think it's more tied to that, which means that we don't get a lot of arguments with them when we ask them to go bring in the trash cans and go collect the trash and empty the dishwasher and do whatever the things are that are supposed to do. And I was actually just reading a book called Drives by Daniel Pink, and he talks about motivation. He actually had a whole thing about once you tie like a budget to the chore in a lot of ways, like that's always going to be tied now. You present it to the child as like this chore is worth this much, and now that link has been made and you can't really unbreak it. And if anything, the amount that they want for that particular chore is likely to increase over time. So, I found that a kind of very interesting take on it. So yeah, we kind of motivate them. We try to motivate them by you're a participant in our family and being in this household and living in this house means that we all take part in doing certain things, but it's not necessarily tied to like that specific amount of money for a particular chore that they're supposed to be doing. So, we kind of do that. We do model saving, but at the same time, my 12-year-old, we give him parameters now because like he likes to go out to lunch with a friend after school. There's a Trader Joe's right there. He's got my credit card.
Mm-hmm.
I give him very specific rules. I'm like, you can buy two things with a total value of $10, so that way he doesn't come home with all of Trader Joe's, and he
Yeah.
understands that,
Yeah.
right? Trader Joe's is very easy to spend $50 on like random snacks, which is awesome, but he understands like this is how much I have been given to
Yeah.
spend. And one time he did overspend on my card because he was being very lavish and buying all his friends lunch too. And, he actually came and he was like, Mom, I'm sorry I spent so much. And he went and got $40 of his own money and brought it to me and was like, this is, paying me back. And
Yeah.
it's really hard. It's really hard to navigate these things, but we try, like I said, they do see how you interact, and they do
Yeah.
kind of model a lot of that.
Absolutely. And it's all learning opportunities. So the last slide here is just all the different strategies. So I'm not going to go into them in detail because there's just too many and it just depends on your phase of life. But I'll leave them up here for a moment. Is there anything that you wanted to say as we wrap up, Natalie? Because after this, I'm going to talk a little bit and I'll answer some questions if we have them.
I would say really don't shy away from talking to your kids about money. Honestly, they're very smart and able to understand conceptually. I had my younger one, he was like, I didn't have too much money in my wallet from birthdays and stuff like that. And he was like, can you put it in my savings account for me? so that he understood that. And every so often they want to, go look on mobile banking and see how much they've got in there. And I've actually taken them to the bank before so they can deposit a check or whatever from their birthday so that they actually understand the process, that the bank is an actual place.
Yeah.
It's not just like this mythical being that exists in sort of your brain. It's an actual physical location. So getting them involved with understanding a lot of those concepts, especially as we go cashless, it becomes a little bit nebulous sometimes. So, we always remind them, just because we gave you $30 doesn't mean you have to spend all the $30, you
Absolutely.
know? And it's actually interesting to see how that works out. We gave them money to go on a field trip to Dave and Buster's, and the one that we could have sworn was going to spend the extra $20 came home with it, and he was like, "I didn't need anything."
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to teach your
So
kids about money. And
yeah,
again, another presentation in itself. So um, I will send you any questions that we get, if we get any. But thank you so much, Natalie.
oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I will ping you after and we
All
can
right,
talk further.
sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not going to talk about these too much. Um, if you're watching this live or watching the recording, feel free to ask me about them, but we're just out of time. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them and I'll get back to you later. I'll reply to your comment. But there are just so many strategies around all the things we talked about. If you need to know the numbers of all the decisions that you're making, I have a PDF that shows you all of the 2025 financial numbers you need to know. And you can get that by signing up for my newsletter. It's free. It's the first email that you get. Just make sure you check your spam and confirm your email, and then you'll get this. And then I'll send you a bunch of other great emails with resources, free access to my planning software. And yeah, there's a lot of great information on here that you need to understand. And then I update this every year with the new numbers. If you're interested in holistic financial life planning, feel free to reach out, go to my website, schedule a call, see if we're a good fit. And lastly, I will check to see if there's any questions, and then I will send them to Natalie as well. But you can go to motiplanning.com for more resources. Follow me at Spencer List for daily inspiration. You can email me or subscribe to my newsletter. And let's see, let me double check real quick, see if we've got any questions. Okay, well, feel free to ask your questions in the comments, and I'll be here for a couple more minutes. But I hope you all have a great day and keep thriving.